It's hard to imagine surviving a winter blizzard without modern gear, but Native Americans did it every night. What hidden design in their teepees made them warm enough to endure freezing winds and snowstorms without ever sealing them shut? When you think about surviving a brutal winter night in nothing but a tent made of animal skin, your first thought probably isn't, "That sounds cozy." Well, you'd be wrong. Native Americans didn't just survive in teepees during freezing nights, they thrived in them, and honestly, their design makes most modern camping gear look like amateur hour. The secret starts with that distinctive cone shape. It's not just for looks, folks. That pointed top acts like nature's perfect wind deflector, slicing through howling blizzards like a hot knife through butter. While rectangular buildings get pummeled and sometimes collapse under wind pressure, teepees just stand there smugly, barely budging. The conical design distributes wind force evenly around the entire structure, basically the same principle engineers use in modern wind tunnels. But here's where it gets really clever. See those adjustable flaps at the very top? They're not decoration. Those smoke flaps work like a medieval thermostat, allowing occupants to fine-tune ventilation without turning their cozy shelter into an icebox. Crack them open just right, and smoke escapes while precious heat stays put. Close them during a blizzard, and you've got yourself a sealed thermal chamber. Archaeological evidence shows some teepee designs could handle temperatures as low as -30 degrees Fahrenheit. That's colder than most people's freezers. The animal hide covering, usually buffalo or elk, created multiple layers of insulation. Think of it like wearing a really, really big winter coat that covers your entire house. The genius doesn't stop there. These structures were designed for mobility, which meant tribes could literally pack up and chase better weather. Your cranky neighbor complaining about the cold all winter, Native Americans just moved somewhere warmer. Talk about a practical solution to seasonal depression. Then there's the thermal barrier effect. Multiple layers of treated hide wrapped around those wooden poles created dead air spaces. The same principle your fancy down jacket uses, except these folks figured it out centuries before REI existed. The hides were treated with brain tanning methods that kept them flexible even in brutal cold, preventing cracking that would let precious heat escape. What really gets me is how the whole design works together. The steep wall sheds snow instead of collecting it like a flat roof would. The narrow base minimized ground contact where cold could seep in. Even the entrance design, typically facing east, took advantage of morning sun for natural warming. You might wonder how they managed the tricky balance between staying warm and not suffocating from smoke buildup. Well, that's where their mastery of firecraft becomes absolutely essential. Getting a fire started is one thing, but keeping yourself warm all night without turning into a smoke-cured ham? That's where Native American fire mastery really shines. The central fire pit wasn't just thrown together randomly. These weren't your backyard camping enthusiasts roasting marshmallows. Every stone placement, every wood choice, every spark mattered when temperatures dropped to bone-chilling levels. Wood selection separated the survivors from the shivering masses. Hardwoods like oak and hickory became liquid gold during winter months. Why? They burn hotter and longer than softwoods, creating sustained heat that could last through those brutal midnight hours. Pine might catch fire faster, but it burns out quicker than a politician's campaign promise. But here's where things get clever. Native Americans discovered that certain rocks could turn their fires into ancient space heaters. They'd arrange heat-absorbing stones around the fire pit, creating natural radiators that distributed warmth evenly throughout the teepee. These rocks soaked up heat like sponges and released it slowly long after the flames died down. The real genius lay in fire maintenance techniques passed down through generations. Skilled fire tenders developed methods to keep fires burning with minimal smoke production. Nobody wanted to wake up gasping for air or exit their shelter looking like they'd been working in a 19th century factory. And speaking of smoke, the positioning mattered enormously. Too much smoke meant everyone inside would be coughing like they'd been chain-smoking peace pipes. Too little heat meant freezing solid before sunrise. Finding that perfect balance required years of practice and intimate knowledge of wind patterns. Then there's the heated stone technique that would make modern heating pad manufacturers jealous. Some tribes heated stones or clay pieces in the fire, then carefully moved them to strategic locations inside the tipi. These natural heating elements retained warmth for hours, creating localized heat sources that extended far beyond the fire's immediate reach. The fire wasn't just functional either. It served as the social and cultural heartbeat of tipi life. Families gathered around these flames for storytelling, meal preparation, and community bonding. The warmth extended beyond mere temperature control into emotional and spiritual warmth that sustained entire communities through harsh winter months. Fire management also involved understanding airflow dynamics that would impress modern engineers. The way smoke traveled, how oxygen fed the flames, where to position fuel for maximum efficiency. All these factors required sophisticated understanding of combustion principles. What's truly remarkable is how they maintained these fires through entire nights with minimal wood consumption. Modern campers burn through cordwood like there's no tomorrow, but Native Americans could stretch their fuel supplies through strategic burning techniques that maximized heat output while conserving precious resources. But even the most perfectly managed fire meant nothing without proper insulation surrounding your body during those freezing nights. Now, if you thought teepees and fire were clever, wait until you see what Native Americans wore. These folks basically turned themselves into walking sleeping bags, and honestly, their layering game puts today's outdoor enthusiasts to shame. The secret weapon? Buffalo robes. These weren't just any old blankets. We're talking about massive, thick hides that could make a polar bear jealous. A single buffalo robe weighed around 20 to 30 pounds when properly prepared. But here's the kicker. It could keep you toasty in temperatures that would send modern campers running for the nearest hotel. But here's where it gets really interesting. The way they prepared these hides was pure genius. Brain tanning, yes, you heard that right, involved using the buffalo's own brain to soften the hide. Sounds gross? Maybe. But this process created leather so supple and warm that it remained flexible even in sub-zero temperatures. Your fancy Gore-Tex jacket wishes it could be this adaptable. The layering system was like an ancient version of those Russian nesting dolls. First came the base layer, soft, thin deer or elk hide directly against the skin. Think of it as nature's long underwear, except it actually worked without making you look like a walking marshmallow. Then there's the middle layer. Thicker hide garments, often decorated with intricate beadwork that served a dual purpose. Pretty to look at, sure, but those tiny beads also created air pockets that trapped body heat. Fashion meeting function, something our ancestors figured out centuries before we started paying $200 for technical outdoor gear. The outer layer? That's where the buffalo robe came in. Worn fur side and during the coldest weather, it created a microenvironment around the body. The fur trapped warm air, while the thick hide blocked wind better than any modern windbreaker. Let's talk about their feet for a second. Moccasins stuffed with rabbit fur or dried grass kept toes from turning into ice cubes. These weren't just shoes, they were portable foot warmers. Some tribes even used a double moccasin system during winter, with an inner soft shoe and outer waterproof layer. Basically, they invented winter boots before winter boots were cool. The really clever part? Everything was designed to work together. The clothing didn't just keep you warm, it breathed. Unlike synthetic materials that turn you into a walking sauna, these natural materials wicked moisture away from the skin while maintaining insulation. Even when these garments got wet, and trust me, they did, the natural oils in the treated hides helped them dry quickly and maintain their warming properties. Try that with your cotton sweatshirt. But all this personal insulation was just part of the equation, because when bedtime rolled around in those freezing teepees, they had another trick up their sleeves that would make luxury hotel chains take notes. When night fell across the plains, Native Americans didn't just throw on another blanket and hope for the best. They had a bedding system that would make your expensive memory foam mattress weep with envy. Buffalo hides formed the foundation of their sleeping arrangements. But here's the thing, they didn't just toss a single hide on the ground like some amateur camper. These folks layered thick buffalo robes like they were building a fortress against the cold. The bottom layer, that was their mattress. Dense, thick hides that created a barrier between their bodies and the frozen earth below. Then came the genius part. They elevated their beds whenever possible. Raising the sleeping area even 6 inches off the ground made a massive difference. Cold air hugs the ground like a clingy relative at Thanksgiving dinner, so getting above it was crucial for survival. Bear furs took center stage for the ultimate sleeping experience. These weren't decorative throws. They were survival tools disguised as luxury bedding. A single bear fur could weigh 30 pounds and provide insulation that modern sleeping bags still struggle to match. The natural oils in bear fur actually repel moisture, keeping the sleeper dry even when their breath created condensation in the frigid air. But wait, there's more. They created complete enclosures using multiple furs, essentially building a personal cocoon inside the teepee. This wasn't just about piling on more layers, it was strategic engineering. The furs trapped warm air around the body while allowing just enough ventilation to prevent overheating. Unlike today's synthetic materials that lose their insulating properties when wet, these natural furs maintain their warmth even when damp from snow or condensation. Your high-tech camping gear can't make that claim with a straight face. Family members often shared large sleeping areas, combining their body heat under communal fur arrangements. Kids slept between adults, creating a human heat sandwich that kept everyone warm through the coldest nights. Smart positioning meant the smallest children got the warmest spots, while adults took the outer edges. Historical accounts from early traders and explorers consistently praised these sleeping arrangements. Men who'd spent miserable nights in European military tents couldn't believe how comfortable and warm Native American bedding systems were. Some admitted they slept better in a teepee than in frontier hotels. The arrangement of furs followed specific patterns that maximized heat retention while minimizing direct ground contact. Thicker hides went down first, followed by softer, more insulating layers, topped with the finest furs against the skin. This layering system created temperature zones that modern thermal engineering principles still recognize as optimal. Well, staying warm wasn't just about smart bedding choices. The whole teepee had to work like a precision instrument, and that meant mastering something most people completely overlook: the delicate dance between keeping heat in and letting just enough air move to stay alive. Most people think teepees were just leather tents that trapped smoke and froze everyone inside. Well, those people clearly never met a Lakota engineer. The genius wasn't in keeping air out. It was in controlling exactly how much came in and where it went. Think of it like driving a car with broken air conditioning in summer. You don't seal every window shut. You crack them just right to get that perfect cross breeze without turning your hair into a tornado. Native Americans figured this out centuries before anyone invented the word HVAC system. At the top of every teepee sat two adjustable smoke flaps. These weren't just random pieces of hide flapping in the wind like my neighbor's loose shutters during a storm. They were precision instruments. By adjusting these flaps based on wind direction, families could create a perfect chimney effect that sucked smoke up and out while pulling fresh air in from below. But here's where it gets really clever. Near the base of the teepee, there was always a small gap between the hide covering and the ground. Not big enough to let in snow or rain, but just enough to create what engineers today call a controlled air intake. This tiny opening fed oxygen directly to the fire while creating a circulation pattern that kept the air fresh. The whole system worked like a giant lung. Cool air came in low, got warmed by the fire, rose up carrying smoke and moisture, then escaped through the top vents. Meanwhile, warm air circulated around the living space before making its exit. It's basically the same principle your fancy modern furnace uses, except it ran on wood and didn't require a monthly service call. Then there's the condensation problem that would make any modern camper weep. When warm, moist air from breathing and cooking hits cold walls, you get water everywhere. Native Americans solved this by keeping just enough air moving to prevent moisture buildup without creating drafts that would freeze everyone's toes off. During really brutal nights, families could fine-tune their ventilation like adjusting a thermostat. Lift the bottom edge slightly for more airflow. Adjust the top flaps to change the draw. Close everything down tight when the wind picked up, then crack things open again when it died down. This wasn't guesswork. It was engineering passed down through generations of people who understood that staying alive meant mastering every detail of their shelter system. The craziest part? Modern passive solar homes and efficient heating systems still use these same airflow principles. We just gave them fancier names and added electric fans. But even the most perfectly ventilated teepee meant nothing if you picked the wrong spot to set it up. The difference between a cozy winter home and a frozen nightmare often came down to one crucial decision that happened before the first pole ever touched the ground. Well, here's where things get really clever. While we modern folks crank up the thermostat and complain about our heating bills, Native American tribes had a completely different strategy. They didn't fight winter, they outsmarted it. Think about it like this. If your house got too cold, you'd probably just suffer through it or move to Florida. But these tribes, they literally picked up their entire homes and walked away from bad weather. Talk about the ultimate I'm outta here moment. The seasonal migration patterns weren't random wandering, though. These movements were as precise as a Swiss watch, passed down through generations like the world's most important family recipe. Tribes knew exactly when to pack up and where to go, often weeks before the worst weather hit. But here's the brilliant part. Tipis made this mobility possible. A modern house weighs about 80 tons. Good luck moving that when a blizzard's coming. A teepee, on the other hand, could be completely dismantled, packed, and ready to move in under 30 minutes. Makes you wonder why we ever thought permanent housing was such a great idea. The lightweight design meant entire villages could relocate without the logistical nightmare we'd face today. No U-Haul trucks, no storage units, no arguing about who's helping carry the heavy stuff. Just efficient, practical movement that would make modern nomads weep with envy. Then there's the resource angle. By following seasonal patterns, tribes access different ecosystems throughout the year. Winter camps in sheltered valleys, summer grounds in cooler highlands. It was like having multiple vacation homes, except every move was a survival strategy. This mobility also meant they could follow animal migrations. Buffalo moving south for winter, pack up and follow. Deer heading to lower elevations, time to relocate. It was the original farm-to-table lifestyle, except they brought their table with them. Archaeological evidence shows some tribes traveled hundreds of miles seasonally. These weren't desperate refugees fleeing harsh conditions. They were strategic planners executing sophisticated survival blueprints their ancestors had perfected over centuries. The really fascinating part? This nomadic lifestyle actually required less energy expenditure than trying to survive a brutal winter in one location. Instead of burning through massive amounts of firewood and food stores, they simply moved to where conditions were more manageable. Like choosing easy mode in a video game, except the stakes were life and death. Modern climate scientists call this adaptive management, and it's now considered cutting-edge environmental strategy. Turns out, these tribes were practicing advanced climate adaptation long before we had fancy terms for it. But even the smartest migration patterns couldn't account for every weather surprise. When tribes did have to hunker down in harsh conditions, they needed more than just mobility. They needed to master the art of reading nature itself to find the perfect spots to weather any storm. Location, location, location. You know how real estate agents always say that's the most important thing? Well, Native Americans figured that out centuries before anyone thought to put a for sale sign in their yard. Picking the wrong spot for your teepee was like choosing the worst seat at a restaurant, right next to the kitchen door where all the cold air blasts in. These folks didn't have weather apps or meteorologists in fancy suits pointing at green screens. They had something better. Generations of hard-earned wisdom about reading the land. The first rule? Find a natural windbreak. Cliffs, dense forests, or hillsides weren't just pretty scenery. They were lifesavers. Think of them as nature's own apartment buildings, blocking those brutal winter winds that could turn a cozy teepee into an ice cube faster than you could say, frostbite. But here's where it gets clever. They didn't just hide behind any old hill. The entrance always faced away from the prevailing winds. Makes sense, right? You wouldn't build your front door to catch every gust of Arctic air. It's like wearing your coat backwards in a snowstorm. Technically possible, but pretty dumb. Elevation mattered too, but not in the way you might think. They didn't want the highest peak like some medieval castle. Instead, they looked for slightly raised ground that wouldn't turn into a muddy mess when snow melted or rain fell. Nobody wants to wake up floating in their own bedroom. Then there's the water situation. Camps were positioned near streams or rivers, but not too close. Water provided humidity control. Dry air can actually make you feel colder than slightly moist air. Plus, hauling water uphill in freezing weather gets old fast. Ask anyone who's carried groceries up 3 flights of stairs. The real genius move? Seeking out darker ground areas that caught more sunlight during the day. These spots absorbed heat like a black car in summer, radiating warmth well into the evening. It's the same principle behind wearing dark colors in winter, basic physics wrapped in common sense. Let's not forget about the microclimate game. every piece of land has its own personality when it comes to weather. A spot might be 10 degrees warmer than an area just 50 yards away because of how air flows, where shadows fall, or how the ground slopes. Archaeological evidence shows some camps were used year after year because the locations were just that good. Imagine finding a parking spot so perfect you want to paint your name on it. This attention to detail created stable living conditions even when Mother Nature threw her worst tantrums. While the outside world froze solid, these carefully chosen spots maintained livable temperatures through strategic positioning and natural advantages. Pretty impressive for people without engineering degrees.